Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thank you, panelists. Thank you guys for, well, they're busy right now. Doing a selfie. Pay attention.
Priority, sir. Priority, sir.
All right. So I'm Dave Belanger. I'm the CISO at Maxor National Pharmacy. I want to just take a moment and let all these guys introduce themselves, and then we're going to get down to some questions. The way I'm going to do it is all of my questions are kind of two-part questions, so try to remember both parts of the question, please. Okay. Let's start, Jaimin, if you want, and we'll work our way down.
Jaimin Shah, CISO at SRS Distribution.
Oh. Pat Benoit, I'm the lead for Global Cyber Governance Risk Compliance and the Client Security, the BISO office at CBRE.
Randy Potts, I'm the CISO for Real-Time Resolutions.
Allan, Alford, I'm the CISO and CTO at TrustMAPP.
All right, thank you guys. So my first question is something that we've all been dealing with quite recently, Log4j. It's a two-part question. So the first part is if you guys have any advice or war stories, something along those lines, share those, if you're willing to, share those with everybody. The second half of the question, and a lot of the focus of today's panel, is discussing security with the board of directors or the executive team. So the second half of the question is, how have you been talking about Log4j with the executives and the board? So Allan, would you mind starting?
All right. This is the first time in my 20-plus years of working in information security where the big bad public thing hit and I was not affected at all. I had zero Log4j anywhere in my environment. And when they came out with all the adjuncts, like, oh my God, VMware, haha, not using that either. Totally got away with it, got away clean. First time in my life. So I guess stay with it for 20-something years and eventually you'll win one. Yeah. As to communicating with the board, that made it really easy. They asked, where are we at? I said, ain't no thing. And that was pretty much it. So there's my story.
That's awesome. So that wasn't my case. We use VMware Horizon, which we still haven't patched at all. Don't worry, it's going to happen this weekend. We're getting there. So, I mean, that's the biggest thing. Whenever these things come up, like, I think back to, like, Heartbleed 7 years ago, and there was, like, 4 or 5 of those that came, like, right in a row, and I always communicate the same thing, right? Like, it's not the only critical vulnerability out there. We have tons of others. You know, you don't patch Windows for 6 months, you're pretty screwed. So, I mean, we have a vulnerability management process. We're going to follow it. We're going to get the things implemented, and we're going to mitigate where we can as soon as we can. And, yeah, I mean, honestly, my team did a great job. I mean, I was actually out on vacation when that came out, and they texted me, you know, hey, we saw the Log4j thing. We're already blocking traffic where we need to block traffic. We're running scans as soon as we get signatures updated. We'll start patching as soon as we can patch. And so, I mean, that's it. Just have the process in place and trust the process. That's my message to the board. That's what I do, and that's what I try to communicate to our clients, not that they always listen.
So we had no impact. We had work to do to patch. But the war story is that since I face clients primarily, we had lots of clients repetitively, the big banks especially, asking for, what are you doing, what are you doing, what are you doing? And they're sending us these 20 and 30 questionnaires trying to get details out of it. So the very first thing I did, which is I've done it for all the other big events like this too, is I put together basically a statement that said, this is what we did, there's no impact, this is what we're doing. We've upgraded, and send it out. And so, you know, formulate that common statement, and every time they sent in a questionnaire, I gave it back to the account team and said, here's our statement. I did 3 of those. I did 2 in December, and I did a final one near the end of December and said, the first 2 vulnerabilities are patched. Those were the critical and high. The other 2 are medium and low, and I have no obligation to report to you in less than 60 days on those. So, you know, it's part of our normal cycle. Quit bothering me. Nice. So that's the war story. As far as communicating to the board, it's almost kind of the same thing. Is we try not to get involved in any of the statistics or the deep dark secrets or anything like that, but just communicate that this is a normal course of business here. If you want to reduce the effect of something like this, then you know, spend some money in making sure we have all we need to do patching properly, to do DR properly, to do IAM properly, to do all those things proper, spend the money, and then it might reduce the work we have to do. But this is just our job. We do this all the time.
So I have similar stories, right? Basically, when Log4j came out, we all started patching and whatnot. And similar to what you had it, we had our partners asking questions, long list of questions. And all of a sudden on that week, I got an interesting email came across. And surprise, surprise, it's from my cyber insurance. They're asking me truly long list of questions. Are you impacted? All the way to the pointed questions in the sense of what version of tools do you have? Do you use scanning tool? Please provide the list of scanning tool you have it. How frequently are you using it? That's probably the first time where I saw cyber insurance asking that detailed question, wanted to know, and within 2 weeks, they wanted to have a meeting, 30-minute meeting, to understand the security posture of our environment. So that was the first time. So just giving you background, saying cyber insurance is also looking into that, and we'll be asking pointed question. It won't be at the surface level. Your partners are asking you. That has been over the last few years. Now your cyber insurance is asking truly pointed question. And as far as a board, same message, basically saying, we have incident response plan, we practice that, we go through on a daily basis, Log4j or any other critical vulnerability, we have a plan, we have a process, and we're following that.
Yep. Can I have one thing? Sure. One thing to add is, we are our own worst enemies, because how many of us turned to our vendors and started sending out all these ridiculous detailed questionnaires? Stop doing that. My question to my vendors were, are you aware of it? Are you handling it? You know, and if I've done proper due diligence on my vendors and know what their processes are and they've met their assessment level, then that's all I need to know. And so let's not create the problem by being the problem.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. And that's essentially what we did, was just reached out and said, hey, you've heard of it. Are you responding to it? And my experience is similar with the insurance company, reached out pretty quick. I did prepare a statement kind of anticipating the questions from the board and everybody about Log4j. You know, as a team internally, we were looking for what needed to be patched and addressing it. But the other thing that I did is I contracted a third party to do sort of I call it a pen test, but I told them, I don't want you to exploit anything. I just want you to go, you know, Shodan, use all the tools that you would use. I'll give you some of my external IP range, but I want you to go find it on your own and just scan it. And if you find Log4j vulnerability, tell me. I'm going to remediate it. I don't need to know if you can exploit it or not. I put that in the letter that I sent. So when the insurance company asked for it, I had a statement of what we were doing and said, by the way, we got a third party that we're working with that's done an external surface area pen test on us, and they've come back and said that we didn't have any.
Is we're evolving to the point where, I don't know, is it 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, the cyber insurance companies will dictate, you know, how you are implementing controls, what controls have to be implemented, and they'll do it through lobbying legislation that will end up impacting us. So that's a big deal. The other big movement in the industry is there are several companies, maybe more than a handful, I know of a handful of them, that are developing effectively like a risk score for companies based on cyber, that they're trying to get the position of being a FICO score for cyber risk. And if they do that, and they're working with some of the large, you know, Marsh McClellans and people like that, to establish themselves as a score that will set the standard for your premiums. And so that's happening in the industry now too.
No, absolutely. So insurance-wise, same thing. Really the last 2 years, right, has been when it's been kind of spiking up here. No surprise, right? I mean, we see ransomware really taking off. You know, hope you're invested in Bitcoin. It's helping. No, don't. Let me check my... Yeah, okay. Check your balance. Check your balance. You're doing okay? Did they pay today? No. Okay. On the insurance front, I mean, I think that's absolutely where it's going to. Is I was thinking about that this morning, right? So business folks, if you really want to do security, there's a lot of pain that kind of comes. You're not running as efficiently as you can if I've got your environment locked down, we got all these controls and all these processes in place. And so typical business, like we did an acquisition a little over a year ago, and it was a fintech company, and they're very much like shoot by the hip, security comes last, that sort of thing. And it's been a battle to kind of change that, mindset. And I mean, that's why, because it's much easier to move around if I don't have all these security controls in place. And so, yeah, I think honestly, insurance driving that is going to be huge, and it's going to, honestly, it'll make our lives easier, even if we do get a bunch of questionnaires in the interim.
Yep, so last 3 years, I've probably talked to and worked with 6 different cyber insurance carriers. Not just at the role I'm in now, but the role previous as well. Did a lot of work with insurance carriers. And yes, the trend is that they're getting more and more pointed, more aggressive, more detailed. They're learning. They learn the hard way from a spate of ransomware attacks and having to make payouts on stuff where they didn't bother challenging the right things. So yes, they're learning. Yes, they're evolving their game. They're definitely increasing it. And to Patrick's point, there's a book out there called How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity Risk. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. Authors are Doug Hubbard and Rich Sierson. Rich went and had a startup, sold it, and is now working at a cyber insurance company. As Mr. I measure risk for a living in quantitative mathematical ways, he is now positioned at a cyber insurance company. Not at a cyber company, a cyber insurance company. Look out. If they have hired Rich, we have only begun to see the tip of the iceberg in terms of them starting to throttle the detail level, the questioning level. They're going to be coming back and finding weird outlier statistics and saying, oh, companies that have purple lampshades in the lobby get sued, twice as much, or victimized by ransomware, and blah, blah, blah. Like, you're going to start to see some serious, serious attention on this one. This is only the mere beginning of it.
Is there a question?
Well, you get self-insurance is what it'll end up having. You'll get an option for self-insurance eventually, just like we do for most insurances.
Yep. Taxi cabs is the model for that. Taxi cabs. 99% of the taxis on the road. Take the hit, right? That's there's choices there. There's choices up front. If you know you're the business and you haven't put together your plan and you don't have a comprehensive enough program to pass a rigorous cybersecurity audit. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Full agreement. Full agreement. But then you end up where you're in a position of I either meet a standard or I'm paying the fine outright myself, or the ransomware outright itself, or whatever combination thereof. So at some point, it's in your interest to ignore the cyber insurance completely. Look at the simple math of getting to a high level of standard versus oops ransomware, oops GDPR, and all that. So at some point you self-invest too.
And meanwhile, the government's coming out with laws saying that you can't pay certain entities the ransom. And so as a company, if your insurance company is not going to reimburse you, or you don't have insurance and you can't pay, then you just, in some cases, go out of business, right? Mm-hmm. So thank you for the question. Is there another question in the back? What was the name of the book?
How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity Risk. It's an adjunct to How to Measure Anything in Risk, specific to cybersecurity. Total lack of consistency still is what I'm seeing. And again, I've talked to multiples. I don't know if you guys are seeing the same thing.
Lack of consistency.
It began as the Wild Wild West. Everybody was just shooting from the hip and making wild guesses. They've learned that doesn't work. They've learned they have to get tighter, but everyone's definition of tighter is completely different.
And their expertise is different, right? Basically, one company has a really, like what you said, they hired a really smart guy, other one doesn't have it, so they don't understand truly the cyber risk.
The only thing consistent is that they're all working from the same history to do actuarial statistics on, because everybody has the history. Everybody knows what's gone on out there, and so they're working from that same database, but they have no experience in underwriting that data. So that's where it's inconsistent.
That's a good question. So lessons learned, what would I do differently? I don't know that I would do anything differently. The only advice that I would give is tabletop exercises have been so valuable to us. Sitting down with the team and running through scenarios, saying this is what happened, how do you respond? There have been a lot of action items that have come out of those simple tabletops, even with just the security team. But I would open it up to all other areas of IT. But that would probably be my response to that. I don't know that I would necessarily do anything different except start those tabletops on ransomware a few years earlier and start to address some of the things that come up. What about you guys?
I'm going to second that, but I'm also going to say that tabletops these days are far bigger than just you and IT. Drag the board in.
Yeah,
Drag
exactly,
the board in.
exactly.
You guys have got a role here. You've got a fiduciary responsibility. You've got reporting obligations. You've got ownership of a whole lot of, oh, look, the bad thing just happened. What are you doing, Mr. Board Member? What? Walk them through it. Walk them through it.
Yeah, and
So you can do multiple tabletop exercise, right? One with your IT peers, do tabletop exercise, do your incident response, go through the drills like that, but then at least annually with your board.
Yes.
And I did a tabletop with our executive team. I'll call it a tabletop. It was just one question. We got hit with ransomware. Do we pay or do we not pay? But that led to a whole couple pages of documentation for me to do to outline what the policy is and how do I get them the information they need to make that decision.
Yeah. I mean, the best advice I give to everybody is stop chasing the next shiny object. I mean, focus on your basics. If you don't have a good, solid, robust program in basics, where are your assets, IAM, DR, backup recovery, patching, vulnerability assessment, pen testing. If you don't have the basics down, then stop chasing the next shiny object and fix that. That'll get you in a better position for cyber insurance.
You need a framework. I mean, it's good to start with a framework. Yeah.
Yeah, my only thing was going to say, do those things monthly or quarterly, kind of make them architecture reviews too. Like, look at your environment and go, hey, here's our scenario. What in our environment is the weakest link? And then go strengthen that, that constraint optimization type of approach.
So kind of a continuation of the ransomware, but also spreading into, other areas like supply chain has been on top of everybody's conversation lately. And we had incidents like SolarWinds and Kaseya and just thinking back of the past year when the pandemic started and all this stuff, how much has your security program changed? And then the second part is, how much have you changed the way you report to the executives or the board? In other words, have they started asking more detailed questions or very specific questions, or are you still reporting the same thing and nothing's changed there?
So I was just going to say that, I would say that the program has not changed because of those things. It's changed in spite of those things, because those things become distractions. There's not much about any of those things that's different than what we deal with all the time. And so every time we have to report about, hey, we're doing something for this particular, it's noise that takes away from just doing your program, working your program, and building, evolving, and maturing your security program.
I'm going to agree with that in the sense of like, oh, it's SolarWinds, oh, it's Log4j, oh, it's, whatever. Heartbleed, Poodle, frickin' Melissa. Let's go all the way back to ancient history. Yes, you are right. Don't treat those things as one-offs. I think everyone up here has said something along those lines. We already got a process for that, right? It's a thing. We have a thing that deals with the things. We're going to deal with the things. But I will argue that the increase in overall attention to third party is on the rise, that boards are asking more about it. Just back to the earlier topic, the cyber insurance companies, some of those pointed questions are about third party. Everyone is more aware of supply chain than they used to be, and I think it started with the Target breach, right? When the HVAC company turned out to be the point of, where they got popped, like everyone went, whoa, HVAC company, and I think that's when the wake-up call started. And I would argue that I'm spending more attention now overall. If I were to look at the total effort of my program, I used to, I'm going to make up numbers now, roughly, I don't know. It used to be 13% of my time I worried about supply chain, and now it's more like 23%. Like it's increased. I spend more time fooling around with supply chain than I used to.
So yeah, I'd go with the process. Supply chain's really important. I mean, I did some vendor review this week. I think the other lesson I got from that, we don't use SolarWinds, but when that happened, I kind of looked at our vendor that we do use, and I went, they're really not that great. The product that I was looking at was Kaseya. And so then Kaseya happened, and I went, we'll just stay put. I'm good. I'm good. We'll just wait. We'll just weather this storm when it comes.
So I have another interesting story about the cyber insurance, right? So while we were renewing the cyber insurance and all these SolarWinds and Kaseya was going on, our cyber insurance reached out. So we're the distribution company. So they reached out to us saying, hey, we have another insurance. Would you be interested in purchasing additional coverage? That insurance is one of our roofing company. If they experience a cyber incident, and because of that, your revenue stream gets impacted, we'll cover for that. Like, okay, how do we prove that they had a cyber incident? We'll cross that bridge later on, but would you be interested in signing up for this?
I want to be devil's advocate on this too, because I sit between as somewhat as a firewall between clients and vendors, because my team has client security and we answer all the questions to the client, and I also own vendor risk assessment, so they are dealing with the vendors. And I have a conversation at least 3 to 7 times a week about, no, Mr. Client, I'm not going to give you all that information from my vendor. You have no contractual relationship with my vendor. I will attest to and assure you that I have a robust third-party assurance program, but that's as far as it goes. And then I always ask the question, so I'm a client of you, Mr. Bank. Are you going to let me start testing you? Can I authenticated pen test your environment? And well, of course the answer is no. It's ridiculous. And then where does it stop? Third party, fourth party, fifth party? Where does it end?
Guy you met at a party, what's his security posture? Yeah, no, when I worked in the data services industry, that exact phenomenon happened all the time. We want to talk to your vendors. No. And the answer was the same. I'm under contractual obligations, then NDA, and cannot reveal their proprietary security, blah, blah, blah. I had this like canned response I could just rattle off. And it was all about, I'm sorry, I'm obligated to them to not share their information with you, period. Back off.
You know what's fascinating about that is I got a bank CISO on the line once because they were pressing us. The assurance was pressing us to answer the question. And so I asked him, I said, we can't give you that. You know, why would you even ask us? He goes, don't worry about it. You don't have to give it to us. And I'm like, well, then why are you asking? He said, well, you'd be surprised how many people just give it to us. And we'll take it if you'll give it to us. And if you say no, then I'm okay. That's fine.
For them, it's worth asking.
Yeah.
You may say yes.
Right. Yeah, and if you say no, who cares?
Ask 100 people for $1.
Yeah. Somebody will give it to you. All right, well, thinking back to your careers and kind of, there's probably a fair mix of attendees here today, some who are in leadership positions, some who are not, some who maybe want to be. We're talking about responding, communicating to the board. In your experience, was it a skill you had to learn? Was it something that you think is a natural ability or combination of both?
Most of the CISOs, at least that I know, came from a technical background, right? We grew up in a technical background, so we know the language, technical language. We communicate on a technical language day by day, and we understand that. When we got into the leadership role, that's the first thing I had to learn was that's not the language that business use. I had to learn the business language. I had to understand the business. How does a business make a revenue? And where are the risks? I had to understand that. I know my technical stuff. I didn't understand that component. So that's the first thing that I had to learn.
Yeah. In some ways, I'm the black sheep because I'm the sales guy. And the reason that makes me a black sheep is because life got a whole lot easier when I finally accepted the fact that being on the dark side is okay. Everything we do is about sales. And as soon as you start as a leader studying how to market, how to sell, how to listen, how to speak, and all those things like that, talking to the board, talking to senior executives becomes much easier. So come on over to the dark side, embrace your salesman, and you'll be a lot better off.
Yep, and you don't need to go fully to the dark side. My very first CISO gig, I was at Polycom. It was a B2B company in a high-tech space, right? We sold video conferencing, audio conferencing products. It was never, I couldn't go a week without some potential client wanting to speak to me or someone in my organization because, hey, we're about to buy your stuff and hook it up to our network. How secure is your stuff? And so as a practitioner CISO trying to secure an entire company and also in charge of all the product security, I very quickly realized there's a sales role to that. You have to meet with the client and explain to them, yeah, we're cool. Here's our process, here's our procedures, here's our policies, here's our frameworks. Here's the latest pen test report, whatever you feel like you can share and divulge, learning that kind of client-facing language and realizing that no matter who you are in the company, you've got a role in sales. You do, period. Especially in B2B and especially in tech. So it started from there for me, and then to your question about going to the board, it's the skills Jaimin talked about. You learn business language. You start there, and you work your way up. And it's just like getting promoted through your career. You know, you start as an individual contributor, and then you make manager, and then you make senior manager, and da-da-da-da-da. Your ability to communicate business terms to the right people grows and evolves in the same way. I was not qualified to speak to the board when I was in my first CISO role. They would not let me in front of the board, and they were smart to not do that. Here I am years and years later, whatever, it's the board. But it took me a long time to get there. And, you know, I guess for me, the main reminders are, you know, first of all, everyone's human. You're terrified of the board the first time you go before them. They're just human beings like you. Every board is different, and every board is comprised of individual members who are different from one another. So the trick is to get inside assistance, you know, from execs that are higher up than you that deal with the board more often. Put them forward, learn the tricks, learn that, oh, okay, Sam's on the board. Sam's going to want you to do metrics. Okay, got it, metrics for Sam. You know, Sally's on the board. Sally's going to want a storytelling kind of approach. Okay, storytelling Sally. Get the inside scoop. Send your agents out. Learn everything, and then the first time you go before them, it's so much easier.
So advice to aspiring security leaders, whether it's a CISO or any role in security, I would say find a mentor. What advice do you guys have for somebody who might be an aspiring security leader?
Yeah, I agree with it. Go, reach out to any CISOs in DFW, wherever you are. Reach out to any experienced CISOs and say, hey, I would like to be interested in learning that. Also, what I've done is what you said, Allan, is I reached out to a couple of board members. They say, hey, I'm first-time CISO. Help me understand this. And they were willing to, like you said, they're human beings. They said, let me help you, let me teach you. And I had, in my previous company, I had quite many of them basically providing literally teaching moment and said, this is what you need to, this is how you present. Like you said, matrix, don't do buzzwords, don't do technical jargons. This is presented in a risk. You have a cyber risk, present that one. Business understand the risk. Business understand the financial risk, competitive risk. You have a cyber risk. Present it from that perspective.
Yep. So one important thing in this is be succinct. So you're going to over-explain. Don't do that. Say less. Let them ask questions. Sales is all about relationships. I had dinner with 2 board members last night. I talk to them all the time. Build those relationships with them. It's very valuable. You'll understand kind of where the business is going and what it wants to be doing. And then, you know, that'll really influence you as far as what you're going to want to invest in your program. And it'll also help you understand how to communicate to them better.
I love Randy's be succinct. I teach all the time. Pretend that you're in a courtroom drama and you're being prepped to be a witness. And if somebody asks you a yes or no question, that only demands a yes or a no.
Right.
That's it. Let them ask the other question. Don't try and guess what they're trying to get to. Let them ask the question and answer the question you're asked. That's it.
Yep, I like that. And I'm going to totally echo what Randy said. I'm trying to think on how many members. 5 members on my board, and I've got 4 of them in my phone. I've got 4 board members right here I can reach out to in a 5-member board for my company. And it took me about a year to get to that point where I was in that relationship with them. But I have no qualms at all working with my CEO. Of course, I don't go over his head. But just saying, hey, I'm going to reach out to board member so-and-so and get their take on such and such. And you know, we want to present to them. Let's find out ahead of time what they want. Let's not waste anyone's time. And you know, just reaching out and finding out ahead of time even what's anticipated. You may think you're walking into a yes/no meeting and it turns out they want a full debrief on this other thing you didn't even prep for. Like, right. Do the reconnaissance and just find out even what the heck they want, right? Because that saves time big time.
Well, and there's a lot to be said for experience because you try to do the yes/no thing, but on the other side of that is you try to anticipate questions so that you're giving the information. But before you have the experience of understanding who your audience is and having the chance to work over a period of time with the board, you can open a can of worms by giving too much information. You certainly don't want to step into it.
It's okay to be prepared for the question, but you don't have to answer it until it's asked.
Yeah, and be truthful, right? Basically, you don't need to be doing the partial truth or dance around. Be truthful. If you don't know it, it's okay. Tell them, saying, hey, let me get back to you. It's okay to say that instead of making up on the fly at that point.
Yeah, there's a lot of value in having a CISO that's transparent, and I think that a lot of boards are, that's what they're looking for.
One thing I was going to say, Pat, you made me think of this with the trial preparation thing. Reach out to your general counsel. I happen to report to our general counsel, but even at other jobs, it's really, lawyers are the most non-technical people on the planet, and I'm sorry if you're an attorney, but if you can communicate to them well and kind of, you know, give your presentation to them, they're going to come at you with all sorts of questions that your board will probably never ask. So it'll prepare you very well.
That's a good idea. That's great advice.
So we're giving advice that none of you really asked for, but are there any questions along these lines for any of these CISOs? Yes, ma'am. Is there anything you're excited for? Does it have to be security related? It could be anything.
No, honestly, I mean, the thing I love about working in technology and why I've always liked working in technology is you really have like a 3 to 5 year refresh cycle. So there's always something to be looking forward to, you know? So I think as we move kind of more into this like cloud space and we kind of like the containerization of everything and like, it's just gonna, there's all these new tools that are coming out that I'm doing 5 POCs right now, which is stupid because I'm super busy all the time. But I mean, no, I love just getting to learn new technology, and I'm almost 20 years into this, and it's still exciting and fun to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I get up every morning. I love the opportunity to try and make sense out of chaos. And so I'm excited every day about the fact that I get to get up and I have no idea what's going to go on in that day other than the 15 or 16 calls that are on my calendar. Beyond that, the world is open. It could be anything could happen, and that's what's exciting to me.
I like it. All right, so for me, and this is going to be a weird one because not everybody does it the way I do it. My last job, I was a practitioner CISO at a 50,000 employee company. My current job, I am a vendor CISO at a shop with 17 people. That's a hell of a gear shift. It is not the only time I've done that gear shift. I will bounce back and forth from practitioner to vendor and back again as I see fit for one reason and one reason only. I'm trying to solve cybersecurity problems. And sometimes you can best do that from the practitioner perspective, and other times there's a vendor who's got this clever idea that you're like, dude, if I went and worked with them and helped solidify that and really added some real CISO wisdom to that solution, heck yeah, we're going to change the industry. And that's exactly what I do. So I always am looking for that cool way that I can basically, the running joke that I always tell my boss is I have one byline for my own career, and that is make CISOing suck less. If I can do that, I'm pumped.
I had another question from the gentleman in the back. Okay, did you hear the question?
Yes,
Everybody hear it? Okay,
I heard, yeah.
Go ahead.
I think they absolutely are trying to learn more as the board. The problem is their general source for information is Wall Street Journal and Forbes, or the airline magazine they happen to be on when they were flying. And so in doing that, you have a responsibility to try and educate them. As far as do they want cybersecurity information? I think there's a huge opportunity right now, and we're going to start to see CISOs that are going to get picked up on boards as board members from larger companies and stuff like that, and especially private companies, because the boards don't feel comfortable enough, and they want an inside brother or sister that can help them understand what's going on. So I think you're going to see a lot more CISOs get picked up on boards.
So the company we acquired a year ago, I'm on their board, and I think that was just torture for them because so we acquired them. We put myself and 2 other compliance people on their board, and so yeah, we're part of the gang now.
Yes, I'll do the same thing. I echo the same thing. It is our responsibility to raise the awareness, right? They're not aware of it. Like we're learning the business language, I'm helping them to learn the cyber language, right? I'm helping them to understand. So it's my responsibility. So I take every opportunity I get, like what Randy said, to help them, spend one-on-one time with them, learn what their concerns are, and how can I help them to understand that. So that's my responsibility.
I'm going to add one caveat to everything. First of all, agreed with all 3, but one caveat, and that is it depends on industry and it depends on locale. There are more CISOs on Silicon Valley boards than anywhere else, right? There are more CISOs on fintech boards than there are manufacturing boards, this kind of thing. So there's definitely a sort of a hierarchy. But to echo it, there's a definite interest. I think all the boards are aware it's a bigger thing than it used to be, and it matters more than it used to, and they want to know more. In some cases, they do know more. In other cases, they don't. There's a lot more CISOs entering boards. And actually, my board, I was just thinking about this. I've got the former CISO of Intel and the former CISO of Cisco on my board. So that's 2 CISOs on our board.
And I was referring to the real world, not Silicon Valley.
So I'll give you another example. So a couple years ago, I started doing this. I know what board's gonna, one of the members gonna ask me a question. So because they read Wall Street Journal, like, or they read couple magazine. So I read that ahead of time because I know he or she is gonna ask me that question. Sooner or later, by that evening, hey, Jaimin, are we impacted by this? What about this? Can you help me? Because I know that we're going to ask. So I started reading because I need to know what they're going to anticipate, what they're going to ask.
And often they don't read past the first
Yeah,
page.
they read only headlines,
They read
right?
the
They get
headline.
the rest of it, yeah.
So I think you will see more CISOs on boards. But I think you're going to see more CISOs in general. There's still companies out there that don't have a full-time CISO, and I think you're going to start to see that shift as well. There's 2 questions left. Second to last question is just on the reporting structure of the CISO. Do you see that evolving? I mean, I see CISOs reporting to CIO. In some cases now, CIOs reporting to the CISO. What are your thoughts on the evolution of where the CISO reports within an organization?
So I have an opinion about that. First one, right?
Hang on,
First
hang
one.
on.
Yeah.
Pat has an opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
Whoa, let me note that
Red
down.
letter day, mark that on your calendar.
Pat
So,
had an opinion.
so I don't know how quickly it's going to change, but I think, again, that's an evolutionary thing. I think the CISO role is taking the same evolutionary path that the CIO role has taken over time. So we're starting to see more and more CISOs that are going to be elevated to appear to the CIO or appear to the CTO. I think that's going to happen. And I think eventually somebody's going to figure out that you need to have something like a CR in the larger companies, like a CRO, a chief risk officer that owns internal audit, compliance, ethics and compliance, cybersecurity, et cetera. And that will all be one group together.
And reports directly to the board.
And reports directly to the board. Yeah.
That's where it's headed. I think 10 years from now, most of the CISOs are reporting to the board, not to anyone else.
Yeah.
Between now and then, oh my God, I've seen it all. I just personally, I've been a CISO 5 times, and I've worked in other shops, obviously, before I was a CISO as well. I've seen CISO report to CFO, General Counsel, COO, CTO, CEO, board, and CIO. I forgot CIO. Yeah. But I think the general trend is that it's moving up, and I've seen CIO, CISO peer.
Yeah,
I've seen
I start
CIO
seeing
report
that.
to CISO,
Yeah, exactly.
And I've seen CISO report to board starting to happen too.
Yeah, I start seeing the trend of CISO become the peer of CTO or CIO. Yep. That trend is quite many places you start seeing that.
Mm-hmm. You notice Equifax made their CISO report to the CEO, right?
Yep.
Yep.
So I think it's going to vary a lot from company. I mean, I've heard other CISOs who were vehemently opposed to the CISO reporting to the CIO, but I report to the CIO. It works fine. I really think it's a case-by-case basis. It depends on who the person you're reporting to is, what their appetite for the execution of good security is.
Yeah, I've reported to, right now in my role, I report to CTO. My previous roles, I've reported to Chief Compliance Officer. I've also reported to CTO, various different roles. I've also, there were talk where they were going to move CISO to Chief Legal, under the Legal Counsel. Yeah. So, yeah, I've seen those trends.
The problem with those under the CIO, for me at least, is that if you have a good CIO that balances cybersecurity and believes in it, then you're in good shape being under CIO. If you don't, there's a serious conflict of interest there, because you're telling them they have to go patch this or do this or add this control, and they're going, no, I don't want to spend money on that. I want to spend money on this. Mm-hmm. So that's where I see the problem.
Been there.
Yeah, you end up with development objectives that can't go forward without security phase gates. And as the CISO, you know, that's your bread and butter. You've got to make sure they're stopping and they're checking their work along the way.
Well, and keep in mind how a CIO is measured, right? At the end of the day, everybody in the company is measured at that C-suite level by some core set of fundamentals, right? And the set of fundamentals, nobody ever says this. The CIO's #1 measurement is what he doesn't spend. That is literally a CIO's #1 measurement, because uptime is a nice metric to report, but nobody cares. A certain amount of downtime is intolerable, but almost every CIO gets it in the bag, and all right, we stay up for the most part. Okay, how little can you spend and maintain that level of staying up for the most part? That's what a CIO is measured by, and the last thing we need is security trapped in that trap.
All right, pause for any questions. Yes, sir.
No, absolutely. I mean, I love that little meme, right? That's like the gate in the middle of a field and everybody's just driven around it, you know? And so I feel like that is security, right? So the NPS score, you're talking about like net promoter score, right? That sort of thing. So trying to get security champions out there in the world, that sort of thing. So I think this goes to that CISO-CIO relationship as well. Like, I think we need to be enabling the business just like the CIO is. So, I mean, that's our role, is to be out there enabling. And if we're doing a good job of that, hopefully we've got a good NPS score.
And if you want to drive, in my opinion, internal stakeholder NPS, then figure out a way to contribute to external client or customer NPS.
Yes.
Figure out a way that you can monetize security, or you can help drive revenue, be part of the pursuit teams, then sell quicker using security than without.
Yep.
That's the way you get your internal NPS up.
Yep. My first 90 days as a CISO, no matter where I am, what kind of environment it is, no matter if it's B2B, B2C, high tech, whatever it might be, don't care. My first 90 days as a CISO, I am doing one thing and one thing only, figuring out how the hell I can enable this business. So by the time that 90 days is over, my first presentation is to the business to say, hey, here's how I'm going to speed up sales. Here's how I'm going to decrease time to market. Here's how I'm going to accelerate capabilities for the HR department. Here's how I'm going to accelerate capabilities for the marketing department. Whatever you can possibly come up with to demonstrate business value and to show yourself as an enabler, as Teflon, and not as glue, right? You don't want stuff sticking to you and falling to the floor. You want it to just slide right by, because look at you, Mr. CISO or Mrs. CISO, speeding it along. That is #1. Sorry, soapbox.
Any other questions on anything? Open it up. All right. I have another question for the board. This question is actually for our sponsors who are here. First of all, thank you to all the sponsors who are all on the outskirts of this room here. Appreciate you sponsoring today's event. So my question for the panel is, what advice do you have for the sponsors, for the MSSPs, for the third-party value adds out there? How do they get their foot in the door with you after this conference?
So,
I'm going to abdicate from answering this one.
I will speak to and connect to virtually anybody except, like, you know, Belarus or Russia or something like, or India. But I will speak to virtually anybody, vendors or whatever, connect with anybody. But if the very first contact I have talks to me about the service that you want to sell or the product you want to sell, I'm out. If you want to connect with me and develop a relationship, a professional relationship, let's do it. Connect. Let's do it. And then as that develops, you know, it's not a short sales cycle. It's not 2 days, but you know, over the course of the next few weeks or months or whatever, and we see each other a couple times, we talk a couple times. Now bring your product into it.
I'm also going to say, don't spam us, please, because it's very counterproductive. I have friends who worked at FireEye for years, and I run into them, and they go, man, you never respond to my emails. And I go, oh, yeah, it's because I filter FireEye's domain. I don't even read that email. I probably get 100 to 150 marketing emails every day from vendors. I don't read it. Yeah, that's not going to be effective. So please tell your marketing people, don't press the MailChimp button, you know.
I would say the similar things in the sense of, like, build a relationship with us. Don't just basically send an email, hey, I met you at the conference, can I set up an appointment with you? Build a relationship with each one of us, basically. That's what it starts. Like I said, we talked about it earlier, right? You're not at the same company, we're not at the same company, but if you build a relationship, that goes a long way.
Yep. So you can reach me at randy.potts. So a couple things here. First of all, I never do this, but I'm going to give away a competitor that I want you guys to work with. There's a podcast called the CISO Security Vendor Relationship Podcast. David Spark and Mike Johnson, friends of mine. If you are a vendor and you do not listen to the CISO Security Vendor Relationship Podcast, you are doing yourself a radical disservice. because that show is all about that question and a million ways to answer it. So start with that. Second thing I recommend is once a year on LinkedIn, I'm not kidding, I've been doing it for like 5 years now, I repost how to contact me as a security vendor. It's literally a little LinkedIn post, then just go dig through my LinkedIn history and you'll find it. I think maybe 2 months ago I did it, or a month and a half ago I did it again. And it's basically 4 simple steps on how to communicate with me. Step 1, show me that you've got some damn clue of what I'm about, right? Like, hey, I understand your business just bought so-and-so, or, you know, oh, you guys, you know, you gave a talk on such and such and said you're interested in such and such tech. Something that indicates you have some clue what I'm about. Step 2 is, here's what we do. That's it. Just, oh, saw you acquired so-and-so, might be interested, we do blah, blah. Right? Step 3, I'm trying to remember step 3 now, hang on. Step 3 is, here's why we should be the ones you go with in this space, right? So, oh, we heard you acquired a company. We do acquisition security investigations, and you should go with us because Gartner this, or, you know, top 10 Fortune 500 that, or whatever kind of justification you've got for why maybe you should be the one to pay attention to. And step 4, the most important one is, thank you for your time, and if you don't answer, I'm not going to stalk you. Yes. Okay. That's it. That's my 4 steps. Do that. Approach me on LinkedIn. Hit me with that. I'll respond.
I had an example. One of the vendor, and again, I'm not going to name them, they were literally stalking in the sense they send email every day. They would leave voicemails, and the 4th message is saying, hey, I left you messages, you haven't responded. It's like, really? Really? And then another vendor somehow, somewhere, found my cell phone number and called me on my cell phone number. That's absolutely no-no. And the one thing that I would also say, all the CISOs, at least in DFW and many, we talk to each other. We know which vendor does and which vendor doesn't. And I obviously don't want to put you in a blacklist, but we probably say, hey, these guys are doing this. Please don't.
It's not just DFW. Right now, I'm not kidding. I can pick this device up, and within 5 minutes, I can communicate with approximately 800 other CISOs. Yeah. Multiple Slack channels, multiple LinkedIn groups, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just DFW. We talk to each other globally now. Yep. And there are certain vendors, and I'm not going to name names, that have been blacklisted, straight up. Have been blacklisted for crappy sales, crappy marketing techniques, crappy product, whatever it might be. Once you're in that bucket, it is really hard to get out of that bucket, so don't piss off your CISOs.
Yeah, I had to put a filter on your messages about those vendors, Allan. There's just too many of them could come through.
To put a fine point on Allan's 4 rules, the number one thing is, although no CISO has any ego, pretend that they do, and pretend that you have an interest in them as a CISO, not just that you're trying to sell them.
I don't have any ego. What are you talking about?
That's why I said pretend that you do.
By the way, Jamar over here with Deep Watch just texted me, you should go mountain biking with us. Yeah. So I go mountain biking, come mountain bike. Jamar came out. It's great. We have coffee. It's awesome. But, yeah, I mean, those sorts of things. Build the relationship. That's what sales is all about. So come and talk to me.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of Jamar, I've got a sticker that's a picture of him on my laptop. So do that. Get a sticker made of your face and hand that to the CISO and say, you can add this to your sticker collection on your laptop. It worked for Jamar.
All right, we are just about out of time. I have one last question. This question is for Randy. In the time we have remaining, will you please explain quantum encryption to everyone?
Yeah, quantum encryption is why Bitcoin is useless. So eventually we're going to get to that point, right? Like think about the crypto we were using 30 years ago. And we're going to get to a point where the crypto that most blockchains are based on are not really valuable, and there's going to have to be like some sort of shift that goes on, and they're like a guy like me is just going to take all your stuff. That's what's going to end up happening. So invest in Bitcoin, go for it. Some nation state will probably do it. It'll be like Russia or someone. It'll be awful. But yeah, quantum encryption is why we shouldn't sleep at night anymore.
Great. Thanks, Randy. Thank you to the panelists. Appreciate your time today. Thank you to all of you for your attention. Thanks for coming out and being here with us.